Hello and welcome to Biodiversity, a course for planners and decision makers. You're now in Module 3, Complementary Interagency Actions. Lesson 2, Stakeholder Management of Landscapes. This lesson is a brief introduction to a few aspects related to stakeholder participation in managing biodiversity in the landscape. After completing this lesson, you should be able to appreciate the setting for landscape-level stakeholder-supported management of biodiversity and ecosystem services, the extent to which stakeholders already have objectives fully compatible with principles and management interventions supporting biodiversity, ecological processes, and ecosystem services. The important role of complementary interagency actions to achieve national goals for environmentally sustainable development, and ecosystem services as key to synergies between stakeholders. Protected areas have expanded significantly during the last quarter of the century, but biodiversity is eroding, and 2/3 of ecosystem services are degraded. We obviously have to plan and manage for biodiversity throughout the landscape. A landscape supports biodiversity, ecological processes, and ecosystem services by supporting populations of species, facilitating the movement of species, buffering sensitive areas and parts of the PA system, maintaining the integrity of the aquatic system, and supporting ecosystem services. Based on an understanding of how the landscape supports biodiversity, ecosystem processes, and services, conservation biology has provided us with 5 principles. In the column to the right, we list key stakeholders who are shaping the landscape today. And we can see that they come from 5 different ministries, as well as the private sector, due to the extensive land use systems such as oil palm and rubber. A few of the specific management interventions we can apply to comply with principles include riparian vegetation and other corridors, protection of sensitive habitats within the matrix, careful planning of road infrastructure, and so forth. It is also important to mention that several of the key stakeholders not only share compatible objectives, like for instance, the National Landscape Department's desire to rehabilitate riparian vegetation. Though this may emphasize urban environments, it may nevertheless play an important role as part of efforts on behalf of also Drainage and Irrigation Department, local authorities, and so on and so forth. Another example concerns JKR and Perhilitan, who in 4 new roads in Terengganu have incorporated underpasses for wildlife movement without destroying connecting habitat. Here, we see all 3 types of information together that are principles, management interventions, and key stakeholders. This table is difficult to see as a slide, but it is contained as Table 3 in both the Common Vision and the Guideline for Managing Biodiversity in the Landscape in your CD. You may ask the simple question, why bother? And its answer is that pretty much everything the economy and the individual sectors need, they get from the ecosystem services. So how can we motivate key parties to work together? The answer lies in ecosystem services. As previous lessons have explained, biodiversity supports ecosystem processes and function. As previous lessons have explained, biodiversity supports ecosystem processes and function, which may be enhanced by our conservation actions, where key frameworks are the ecosystem approach and principles and management interventions for preserving biodiversity at landscape level. This enhanced support of ecosystem services results in community and household level benefits such as protection of natural capital and what is being introduced in several countries, compensation payments for ecosystem services. It supports services within the landscape such as pollination, pest control, soil fertility, runoff regulation, and water quality. And it supports services outside the landscape such as carbon sequestration, climate regulation, and flood mitigation. In short, ecosystem services represent a suitable entry point for synergies between stakeholders since it supports sustainable livelihoods, sustainable agricultural production systems. To a large extent, stakeholders have objectives compatible with landscape management, and joint efforts are already underway. Landscape support to biodiversity, ecological processes, and ecosystem services may be significantly enhanced by complementary interagency actions. And finally, ecosystem services are key to synergies between stakeholders. Thank you. I do hope to see you again in the next lesson on communicating biodiversity in Lesson 3.